The life of a fisherman, it never gets old. So welcome to the show. Come on, yo, we're going Ike.
Hey everybody, Mike Iaconelli. I want to talk about the baits and techniques that I used in the recent Going Ike episode called The Woody Hole. And it was an awesome show. It's a special little secret place on the Delaware River. And we were in early fall when the fish were really starting to move into that spot. That place, the Woody Hole, is a big wintering area on the Delaware River, and we were on the front end of that thing really being loaded. You know, we caught fish on 2 or 3 different baits. We caught a few on a jig, we caught a few on a blade bait, but our number one bait in this episode was the good old shaky head. And I want to talk to you today about the shaky heads that I fish, how I rig them, and then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we fished them in current and the rod and reel. Let's start with the baits. You know, I love this bait, and it's my favorite style bait to fish on a shaky head, and that's a straight tail worm. And the bait that we used in this show was a Berkley Havoc. It's a bait called the bottom hopper. It's 6 1/4 inches. And when I open up this thing and you look at it, it's a very traditional straight tail worm. 6 1/4 inches straight, flat bottom, bulbous tail. This is the style worm that I love on a shaky head. The next thing is the jig head. And there are so many different shaky heads out there in the market, but this one is really special, and this is the one that I love to fish. And it's a jig head by VMC called a rugby head. And I'm going to open one up, and when you take a look at it, it's a really unique style shaky head because it's got an offset hook on it. And you're going to see that right there. It's got an offset hook. Really special design head. They call it a rugby head because it's a cross between a ball head and a football head. And what that does is it lets it come through cover excellent, especially rocky, gravelly stuff like we were fishing around in the Woody Hole. The last thing I want to talk about in this jig head is it's got a recessed line tie. The line tie is built down into the head, and that's going to let it come through clean. We used 1/8 and 3/16 ounce shaky heads in this show. Now I'm going to show you how I rig it. And the first thing I'm going to do with that bottom hopper is I'm going to bite about 1/4 inch off the top of that worm. So I'm going to bite it down to about a 6-inch bait. I bite it down, and when I've done that, it does 2 main things. The first thing it does is it creates a very flat spot, a flat seat, to where I could set it on that head and make a streamlined package. The next thing it does is it shortens up the bait a little bit and makes it smaller, which is what you want when it's tough out. I'm going to thread that bait on. I'm going to pop it on about 1/8 of an inch, pop it out, and I'm going to go all the way around the bend of that hook. And then when I rig it, I'm going to do a normal Texas style. Some shaky heads have a screw in or a pin, but because it's an offset hook, I'm going to rig this shaky head Texas style and make sure the bait's nice and flat. The one thing, I want to stress this, that you have to do is when you rig it on that jig head, make sure the flat side's facing down. A lot of your bites are going to come on the fall, and with that flat side facing down, it's going to glide. The really unique thing about a shaky head is it's what I call a 50-50 bait. And on every cast you make with this, you're going to present the bait to fish 2 different ways. And the first one is the fall. And as this bait falls on a semi-slack line, it actually glides down. Look at the hook in the head and that flat side on the bottom. It looks like a keel on a boat. And as that falls on a semi-slack line, it glides down to the bottom. Very unique action, different than a Texas rig, different than a jig, and a lot of your bites are going to come on the initial fall. And you're going to see that in the Going Ike video. The other half of your bites are going to come after it hits the bottom. And once that shaky head hits the bottom, I get my rod tip and I put it about 2 o'clock and I'll just shake my tip. And when that bait sits on the bottom, this is exactly how it lays. Look at it. Nose down, tail up on an angle. And when you shake your rod tip, that tail quivers. Very, very unique to a shaky head, especially in a place with a very silty bottom, like the Delaware River. Having a bait stand nose down, tail up is going to get a lot more bites than, say, a traditional Texas rig. So the shaky head was one of the main baits that we used. Again, let me stress the keys: let it fall on a semi-slack line. Half of your bites will come as it falls. After it hits the bottom, get your rod, shake it, shake your rod tip. That tail is going to quiver as it sits nose down on the bottom. Let me talk a little bit about the rod and the reel. I'm going to mention the areas we fished it. The rod and the reel, I used an Abu Garcia Ike series rod, and I used it in the 6.6 medium heavy side. That's a killer rod for a shaky head. The shorter rod lets you slow your presentation down, and at the end of the day, you need to set the hook. It's a single hook. You need to set it so that medium heavy action is a better action. On the reel, we used a 20 size Abu Garcia SX and the Premier reel during the course of the day. But the common denominator, 8-pound Berkeley 100% trilene fluorocarbon. The fluorocarbon is going to let that bait have maximum action, so remember that. And then the last thing I want to touch on is how we fished the bait and where we fished it. And the Woody Hole is a tidal, current generated place, and we made sure that on every cast we targeted current breaks and seams. And a current break is where the current hits an object and bounces off. The seam of that current break is where the fast moving water meets the calm water, and you actually see a seam. Bass in tidal water, like on the Delaware River, always feed in those seams and current breaks. So you're going to see in this Going Ike episode called the Woody Hole, you're going to see us fish behind the bridge pilings, behind the culvert. You're going to see us targeting rocks and stumps that create current breaks. And that's where the fish feed. I want to throw my shaky head up current, let it come down in that seam, on that current break, and that's where you're going to get bit. Listen to me. If you fish tidal places, current areas, if the fish are in transition and it's tough, try that shaky head, rig it like I said, fish it on that 6.6 medium heavy combo, and target those breaks. And you're going to catch a lot of fish just like we did.
When I fish like him, you know I'm fishing hard. You might wanna say that I'm going Ike.